All right, welcome everyone. I really appreciate everyone for attending, and I want to give a big thank you to all of our speakers today. It's a very important event, in my opinion, to come together and put some pressure on Governor Ed Lamont and to show the state that we do not need more fracked gas infrastructure as climate change really starts to ravage the landscape as we see freak once in a lifetime storms more and more often, from the Hurricane Katrina to Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico and to the freak freeze in Texas just a couple of days ago. We understand that climate change is here and climate change is a massive problem. And as a state and as a community, we need to ensure that we are doing what's right for the climate and not burying ourselves deeper into fossil fuel infrastructure. Yeah. With the proposed gas plant in Killingly, another fracked gas power plant that the state does not need and the state, most people in the state do not want, we need to come together and rally like we are today to continue to put pressure on the state representatives and the state government to ensure that this plant is never built and this plant never runs. With us today, we have a list of fantastic speakers, and I'm going to be kind of emceeing. There's also the simultaneous caravan going on in Hartford, where we have cars circling deep in the state capitol, making noise to make sure that the people in power hear our demands that this fracked gas plant cannot be built. Up first, we're going to go to Leah Rawls. Leah Rawls is with the NAACP in Windham. And go ahead, take us away, Leah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitch. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be here today. My name is Leah Rawls, and I am the president of the Windham Willimantic branch of the NAACP in the northeast corner of Connecticut. So we cover that entire area of what they call the Quiet Corner. I appreciate the opportunity to join you in solidarity as we work to end environmental injustice in Killingly and environmental racism in our state. I want it to be known that we oppose construction of the Killingly fracked gas power plant. It is a risk to the health of all who reside, work, or play in the Killingly and surrounding towns. With 2 million tons per year of carbon dioxide, particulate matter, and other pollutants flowing out from a stack only 150 feet from the ground, children, elderly people, and those of any age with respiratory problems and other health issues cannot expect to escape the effects of these substances, which fall onto their soil, into their water, and to be part of the air that they breathe every day. Killingly's population, official demographics do not really represent an accurate picture of who will be suffering these health effects. A majority of white families obscures the fact that the number of biracial children in Killingly and surrounding towns is on the rise. When parents from mixed-race families register their children for schools, it is common for those students to be registered as white, particularly if their mother is white. So we can assume that there is more diversity among this population than is usually officially recorded. For several years now, Killingly has already had a fracked gas power plant in operation, only about a mile from the proposed site of this new project. We know that new pollutants will be added to the emissions already produced by the first power plant. This is the very definition of environmental injustice. Build a brand new polluting fossil fuel plant right next to an existing one in a town with a history of economic hardship is exactly what we are trying to avoid. Since pollution does not respect town borders, we really cannot predict how many residents of the surrounding towns of Pomfret, Putnam, Brooklyn, Thompson, Plainfield, and others in Wyndham will feel the health and environmental effects over the 20-year projected life of this plant. Our governor has set energy goals for our state. This will be severely undermined if this plant is built. We urge him to use his authority to prevent construction and allow us to move forward toward the clean, renewable energy our NAACP stands for at the local, state, and national levels. Let us continue to stand together for the sake of the future generations and to bring about the end of environmental injustices like in Killingly and environmental racism in our state and beyond. I thank you for your time today. Please speak out to your state legislators and representatives in all areas, particularly in the Killingly area, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Leah. Powerful words about environmental racism and environmental injustice. We know that Black and brown people in this country and poor people in this country are disproportionately affected by the pollutions that make a tiny minority of this country very, very, very wealthy. And that's a huge problem. So I thank you for speaking truth to power. And I'm so glad you're here with us today to do that and to be a champion for environmental justice here in Connecticut. Thank you, Leah. Up next, we have Mike. Mike is an electrical worker and from the Connecticut Workers Climate Crisis Response Team, which is an organized group of labor activists that are trying to put forward labor's best foot and saying what the governor should do about the pandemic, for workers' rights, and that sort of thing. So up next, we have Mike P. Mike, take us away whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you, Mitch. And thank you, everybody, to all the speakers and everybody that's at the car caravan right now doing important work. I just want to say good day, everyone. I want to thank everybody for coming out and the organizers for giving me a moment to share a few words. Despite the damning evidence that we're in the midst of climate change and almost certainly headed towards a point of no return, the capitalists and their lapdogs continue to steer us down the road to ruin. Connecticut does not need another gas-fired power plant. Any further expansion of gas infrastructure is a move in the wrong direction. As an energy exporter, it makes no sense to construct a new power plant that relies on fracked gas imported across miles of pipeline, endangering the land and communities they pass. This plant is a glaring example of the contradictions placed on our shoulders. For example, a few years ago, I reluctantly took a job to work on the Tawantic gas plant in Oxford. It was not a good feeling having to walk up that hill knowing I was helping construct an energy plant that would contribute to negatively impacting our environment. A lot about that project didn't make sense to me, as much of the energy generated at that plant was to be exported to our neighbors in Rhode Island, but more so, why we were increasing our dependence on fossil fuels. Though as reluctant as I was in a tough position. My wife and I were expecting a child, and I was broke. I share that to say, as workers, we shouldn't be forced to choose between a paycheck and our future. We shouldn't have to decide between financial stability or sustainable planet for our children and the generations that follow. It's precisely because of these contradictions is why I'm here today. Climate change affects us all, but those most impacted will be workers and their families. And we are already dealing with the repercussions of climate change, especially folks in the Black and brown communities who have been impacted by decades of environmental racism. I've watched as places like the Lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans and Puerto Rico were battered by what were supposedly once-in-a-lifetime storms that occur with ever more frequency. And even more recently, we looked to Texas where a freak winter storm coupled with deregulation and deliberate unpreparedness crippled the state. Many were left without power during a crucial time that resulted in the loss of life. That's why now more than ever, we need a mass movement of labor, climate activists, and communities most impacted by environmental racism. We need a movement that stands in solidarity with Indigenous communities, actively fighting the Line 3 pipeline. We need a movement to fight for a rapid transition away from fossil fuels and full democratic control of our energy resources, so that decisions to save a few bucks over the lives of working people cannot happen again. We at Connecticut Workers Crisis Response say no to the Killingly fracked gas power plant, no to new fracked gas infrastructure, and end all environmental racism. Solidarity.
Very powerful words, Mike, very powerful. It's never an easy decision to decide whether you should feed your family or you should contribute to environmental impact. And that's not a choice that we get to decide as working people. That's a choice that's decided by a tiny minority of folks that get incredibly wealthy off extraction and the extraction of our natural resources and the degradation of our environments. And it's a very emotional thing to hear. So thank you for sharing with us. We really appreciate that. And, you know, like you said, workers need to come together and really fight for a renewable society. I worked in oil before I got into solar, and I was in the Marine Corps and I went to war for oil, unfortunately. And I think these kinds of things is how working people are super effective. I'm much happier being in solar. I can feel okay about my job, and that sort of thing. So thank you so much, Mike. It's very important to hear these words from labor. Up next, we have Earl. Earl is a Killingly resident, and he is representing No More Dirty Power in Killingly. Earl, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. My name is Earl McWilliams, and I live in Killingly on the north shore of Lake Alexander, cleanest lake in Connecticut. Our family's lived here for 88 years. We and our neighbors learned 5 years ago that a Florida corporation, NTE, wanted to build a 650 megawatt fracked gas power plant about a mile from here. The plant would produce 2 million tons of carbon dioxide annually, as well as large amounts of methane, noxious oxides, and particulate matter small enough to get into the lungs and into the bloodstream. Very early on, we also learned that the stack emitting this pollution was shorter than EPA guidelines call for. The stack was to stand 170 feet, but NTE shortened it to 150 feet for what they called aesthetic reasons. What we learned subsequently was that at 170 feet, the stack would have been too high by federal aviation standards, as a stack would be within 10,000 feet of the Danielson Airport. Stack height is vitally important to ensuring that the heaviest pollutants are lifted high enough up into the atmosphere to allow these harmful pollutants to be dispersed over a wide region. In its guidance, the EPA makes the danger of too short a stack clear. On windy days, the heaviest, most dangerous pollutants can be caught up at the top of the stack in a vortex, which pulls the stack's plume down to ground level. The phenomenon is known as blowdowns, which occur when the stack is not sufficiently taller than the next tallest structure on the site. In addition, the 150-foot stack will be located in a natural depression on the site, a 30-foot natural depression, which effectively limits the stack height to 120 feet. We are the local people who breathe local air and who fear that the concentration of pollutants emitted will be a clear and present danger to the hundreds of us living in closest proximity to the plant. But it must be said that the toxic plume will hover in the lower atmosphere over towns and cities throughout eastern Connecticut, Rhode Island, and central Massachusetts, threatening tens of thousands of our neighbors. But there is a greater irony that Leah referred to. The village of Dayville in the town of Killingly already hosts a 650 megawatt fracked gas power plant located about 1 mile from the proposed NTE site. It's called the Lake Generating Plant. Many of us believe that 20 years of breathing its pollution is the cause of the elevated asthma rates which afflict us. Locally, asthma rates are 20% higher than anywhere else in the state. Within a short radius of the new plant are several schools, daycares, nursing homes, but NTE doesn't care. NTE doesn't seem to care because I believe that state regulatory agencies, DEEP, and the Siting Council really don't care either. The Siting Council exists to protect economically disadvantaged communities such as ours from predatory, out-of-state, wealthy corporations coming in to impose serious environmental burdens on cash-strapped towns like us. The Siting Council conducted numerous draining hearings in which its members, and often NTE officials, would sit up on the stage and listen as we worried aloud about the dangers and asked questions. There was almost never an opportunity to discuss and debate the issues then and there. The stack was never addressed. We never engaged on that. They never brought up the problems that EPA saw. Similarly, DEEP ignored concerns that we raised about the polluted runoff from the plant, which threatened to poison the livestock drinking from intermittent streams which flow across the adjacent 150-year-old farm. Recently, DEEP officials have spoken dismissively about the fate of 5 endangered species of bats, which nest in the 100-foot trees growing on the site. Under growing pressure from local folks and an ever-widening base of support from statewide and national organizations, Governor Lamont and DEEP Commissioner Katie Dykes have recently begun bad-mouthing the proposed plant. The governor says he hopes that it won't be built and that maybe the market will kill it. Initially, the plant was supposed to be a 24/7 operation, but recently Commissioner Dykes expressed the expectation that the plant will run as seldom as possible. Well, we already have a plant that does that less than a mile away. None of the electricity produced by either plant will be used in Connecticut. We are being asked to become Connecticut's tailpipe, just as the governor is calling us to become carbon neutral for electricity production. But the dirty little secret revealed in Senate Bill 882 is that the 0% goal will only apply to electricity produced and used in Connecticut, so that the pollution produced by lake generating and the proposed NTE plant will not be counted toward those goals. My wife and I are actually foot soldiers in 2 efforts to defeat huge fracked gas power plants. We were part of the effort that killed Invenergy's efforts to build another 650 megawatt plant 20 miles away in Barrowville. From those efforts, we learned that success takes more than a village. And we are so grateful for the outpouring of support from state, local, and national organizations, which see our local fight as part of the existential effort to save the planet. Together, we can defeat this beast. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Earl. It's always so good to hear from someone who lives so close to the center of what's going on. And it's very important that we hear your stories and that everyone here in Connecticut shares and uplifts them and fights with you, because it's, like you said, pollution does not respect state borders. So we all need to come together and fight and fight the good fight against NTE and against the Siting Council and DEEP if necessary. So thank you, Earl. I'm actually going to see if Rachel's on now and see if she can turn on her camera and some audio so we can kind of check out what's going on in Hartford with the car caravan. Rachel, could you do that for us?
Right now it's hard. Can I do that later? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. We'll come back to you, Rachel. Thank you. So up next we have Mitch Kaviter from Sunrise, Connecticut, a well-known climate justice warrior here in Connecticut. Shares a very important first name with me, so that's great. Mitch, take it away.
Thank you so much, Mitch. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be here on behalf of Sunrise Movement Connecticut, as well as the youth voices of our state in regards to Killingly. I imagine a lot of what we have to say here today is nearly the same, because we all know the facts, and we know that Connecticut does not need or want this new fossil fuel plant. It'll harm our climate targets, harm our land and our people, and stand as heresy in the years to come, as the climate crisis worsens. For a long time now, the governor and DEEP have been very wishy-washy on their stances in regards to the plant. Yet amid growing pressure, as we've cited, on January 19th, the governor finally gave his most direct statement on the power plant, saying, quote, "I don't want to build Killingly," at the League of Conservation Voters Summit, annual summit. Yet little is being done with all the faucets of responsibility that are being shifted around. The governor claims that it is out of his hands and rather DEEP holds the power. Yet DEEP claims that it is up to ISO New England, our regional grid operator, while ISO New England has claimed that such an assertion is false and that it is up to the state. We all know why no one wants their hands tied to this. The climate crisis is real and growing stronger with each passing day. They don't want to be held responsible by anyone or future generations. I know I wouldn't want to be tied to this. Responsibility for something like Killingly is a funny thing. It is uniquely ironic and hypocritical that in the midst of this Killingly debate, our state is actively mustering lawyers and suing ExxonMobil for lying and hiding information to the American public and for damages associated with climate change and the continued use of fossil fuels. While another wing of the state, the executive branch, goes in what almost feels like the exact opposite direction. The proposed plant is not needed. It will produce 650 megawatts of energy for all of New England for the supposed needs of the future, yet harm Connecticut the most. It is against Lamont's own 2040 energy goals as laid out in his executive orders, which may prove to be too late anyways, and questions the integrity and makes us question the integrity of our government for following through on promises. Lamont led with setting a timetable for carbon neutrality and asked our neighbors to follow our lead. So why not keep that lead and let us lead through example by instead greatly investing in things like energy efficiency? The plant is another stepping stone towards the path towards climate catastrophe. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says we only have until 2030 to turn things around. Our own state studies back up such and acknowledge the rapid need to transition. We don't need or want another dirty fossil fuel plant contributing to the climate crisis with millions of pounds of carbon dioxide. And it's not just the additional emissions we are worried about. This plant poses a dangerous potential harm to our beautiful Connecticut environment. With 90,000 gallons of wastewater per day filled with lead, ammonia, petroleum, phosphorus, copper, and more, with a 2.8-mile-long pipeline that would tear through wetlands and streams, ruin a native brook trout stream, a habitat for endangered species such as the northern long-eared owl, and tear through vital wetlands. The pipeline would cross under the Quinnebog River and be prone to easy leaks, raising water quality concerns. Now, right now is crunch time. With the plant set to begin construction this year and only 2 more permits awaiting confirmation, something needs to be done now. The governor does have the executive power to cancel this plant, even retract from ISO New England as an extreme solution, or advocate for things like Senate Bill 718 that Sunrise Connecticut and our allies have been pushing, which would ban Killingly and future fossil fuel infrastructure in our state, firmly placing us on a brighter future. Should Killingly be canceled, we can make up for the energy lost through tried and true means of expanding energy efficiency here in our home state, a state that has already has among the highest costs of energy in the nation and could absolutely benefit the most from such a vision. Energy efficiency in the last 2 decades alone has prevented the need for multiple new fossil fuel plants. And believe me, there is still much energy efficiency measures to be done here in Connecticut. Energy efficiency is already one of the largest growing sectors in Connecticut, employing many, and would help us save megawatts, create jobs, bring down energy prices in the midst of an economic crisis, and most importantly, stave off climate change. Not to mention, line up with the rest of the administration's agenda, as opposed to Killingly being the glaring mishap. Governor Lamont, Commissioner Dykes, and other leaders, the youth of Connecticut don't want to see this fracked gas infrastructure. Students statewide are fighting against fossil fuels relentlessly and advocating for a green future for our people and our planet. as high school students advocate through their civics course projects for community solar, as Yukon students push against new fossil fuel boilers to power stores, it is without doubt that this decision to move forward will be looked down upon by our state's youth and will be a stain on this administration's pro-environment agenda. Be bold and stand for our future. Stop the Killingly fossil fuel plant. Thank you.
Mitch, incredibly well spoken. We appreciate your activism and your continued fighting against fossil fuels and climate change here in Connecticut. A strong ally, and the youth are so important to this fight because they get it. They understand that they're looking down the barrel of a future of horrific climate change. And there's so many talented and powerful fighters among the youth today. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you, Mitch. All right, up next, we have from United Latina en Acción, Tamara Nunez del Prado, speaking from ULA today. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Hear us.
Tamara, the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Ahora sí me escuchan?
Can you hear me now? Now you can hear me?
Yes.
Ya. Bueno,
Well, we also know another side of the truth, a side that comes and the reason why a lot of immigrants are in this country, and all this change in climate and the justice in climate is part, and the migration is a result of all this. In our countries in Latin America, there are hundreds of international companies that take all our natural resources and leave the countries poor. I'm going to give you a general example of some stories where I was, we were victims, and our people today are migrants, and now they're here undocumented. For example, in Bolivia, before the companies like Shell, Standard Oil, and others, they were taking 87% of all the money from the oil and all of the mineral resources, and they left all these towns poor. They didn't have any climate protection. Same happens in Colombia, in Peru, in Ecuador, where all these international companies start taking all these resources and they destroy nature. There's no balance. And this is important for them because they're the ones who get all this money and they control everything. This is one of the most powerful countries. In our countries, which is the third world, we don't have the money. If somebody comes in and kills our climate and our atmosphere and everything, is what is going to make us poor. And because we're poor, then we end up coming here. So we are the consequence of the attack to the climate disaster. This is a global issue where I don't remember the exact word, but when things are destroyed ahead of time or before its time, Edison continues working after 200 years. But when we go to Home Depot or to another company to buy just a light bulb, it's going to last 1,000 hours. They're made to fail. My grandparents got married over 75 years ago, and they still have their General Electric refrigerator. That's from the time they were married. But if I buy a refrigerator, it won't last more than 3 years. If I buy a television, it won't last more than 2 years. And this means that everything is built so it won't last, so it will break. And then we create all this trash after trash after trash. And this is also killing our climate. So the way they take advantage of our natural resources, this is all related to all this change in climate. And this is also related to the poorness or the poverty that we live in. Just a simple example is in Totonaca, which is a town in Mexico. And there's another town, I'm going to give you the exact name because it's good that it's clear. Mayoman in San Miguel de Ixtacan in Guatemala, they are overbuilding the plants that gives the electricity to Walmart. And then we see in these examples that they keep attacking our indigenous towns, like the Quechuas in Ecuador, or like the indigenous people in Colombia. So we shouldn't even, we can't talk about climate change without talking the consequences, and that this plant here in Killingly that they want to build. If we don't focus on the politics, on the social side, and on the economic side, we're not going to be able to have an environment that is healthy, and we can't make up with the nature if we don't change this economic system. If we don't do this, we can't do this. We can't reach this if we don't talk about social equity. Everything is related. And it is necessary to know that all of you who can spread the word, it would help if all of us are aware that all this is a cycle and we're all connected, and that even indigenous nations that we have here, we have Juana Islas, who is Totonaca. She ended up coming here to live in New Haven, Connecticut, because they have taken all their lands, and their lands are now part of a hydroelectric plant over there. We need to be aware of this, and you are the people who are perfect to start talking. Let's start a conversation that we want an environment that is healthy. We can talk with these companies or organizations when we can't have any of these conversations without talking about social justice. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Tamara. That powerful words. And if you are a climate activist here in the United States, that means you have to be unequivocally for migrant justice and immigrants justice, because it's the pollution that we create here in the United States that changes the climate, changes all sorts of growing cycles in the global south, changes how much rainfall is in the global south. And on top of that, it's multinational corporations doing extractive policies in the global south that cause migration to happen. So if you're a climate justice activist here in Connecticut, you must be for immigrant justice, you must be for migrant justice, and we have to come together because this is a global problem that the power plant in Killingly is going to cause the temperature to rise, which is going to cause more migration, which is going to exacerbate all the issues. Like Tamara said, everything's connected, and all of these issues are really just one issue. They're really just the issue of humanity coming together and doing what's best for themselves, their neighbors, their family, and the planet entirely. And that's what we need to recognize. Very much so. So I thank Tamara for speaking. I appreciate it a great deal. Thank you. Up next, we have Martha Klein. Martha has been an outspoken fighter against frack gas pipeline expansion here in Connecticut for as long as I've been in the climate movement. She's a powerful speaker. And Martha, you're the one person I'm going to remind to please speak slowly for the interpreter, because I know you get going. Martha, the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you. Mitch, and thank you so much to all of your amazing speakers. I'm really moved by everything I'm hearing. Y gracias a los intérpretes. So, and I agree with everything that's been said. I'm just going to focus my few comments really very much on the state of Connecticut and on our elected and our appointed officials. So just to be clear, natural gas is a marketing term. It's a fracked substance. It's actually methane gas. So I never say marketing. I never say natural gas because it's a marketing term. I'm just going to talk about fracked gas or methane because that's what it is. So the reason we decided to call this event Actions Not Words is because there's a disconnect between the actions of Governor Lamont and Commissioner Dykes and their words. Both of them have talked about reducing greenhouse gas emissions and cleaning up the grid, but neither of them have taken any action that would actually, in reality, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And in fact, by refusing to stop or slow the statewide frack gas expansion, they're both harming the climate and the future. So here's what's actually happening in Connecticut right now. The Department of Energy and Environmental Protection is approving every year between hundreds, or some years it's thousands of megawatts of new and or replacement frack gas power. So the proposed Killingly Energy Center is only one of numerous frack gas expansion projects that are happening all over the state, and DEEP approves of every single one of these. So here's a partial list of what's actually getting expanded in terms of frack gas power in our state. There's the re-permitting of the 375 megawatt NRG frack gas energy station in Middletown. There's the replacement at Yukon of old frack gas boilers with new frack gas boilers in the amount of roughly a couple of thousand megawatts. There's the expansion of gas capacity on the Dominion TransCanada owned pipeline by expanding their compressor stations in Brookfield and Milford to supply more power to New York City. And there's the continued conversion of gullible consumers to frack gas for residential use using ratepayer funds to do those conversions, to provide discounts for the conversions. And this is all happening despite proven risks to human health, particularly child health, of cooking with gas in the home. There's numerous smaller other frack gas powered projects that are getting approved all over the state. So Connecticut is expanding the transport and burning of methane across the whole state, which adds to greenhouse gas emissions, makes our air more polluted, creates future stranded assets, does nothing to lower the high cost of electricity, and does in fact increase the energy affordability gap, and moves us away from the goal of making the grid 100% renewable. Executive Order 3, which we've heard mentioned by some of the earlier speakers, says our grid will be 100% renewable by 2040. That is a paper goal spoken by a governor who will be long gone from power in 2040. Very briefly, the bills that were introduced this year called the Governor's Bills on Climate Change do absolutely nothing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's an insult to our intelligence for them to introduce bills like this that they call doing something on climate change that do nothing. Among their absurd recommendations are to label homes with an energy rating prior to real estate sales. That does not reduce greenhouse gas emissions. These bills epitomize Governor Lamont and Commissioner Dykes' habit of saying something while doing nothing. They can fix the problem. Governor Lamont and Commissioner Dykes can fix this problem. Many other states, such as New Jersey, New York, and Rhode Island, have all rejected fossil fuel projects by the action of their Department of Environmental Conservation or an equivalent agency. States have the right to reject permits when the project is not in a state interest, even when the projects have been federally approved, or in the case of Killingly, regionally approved by the ISO. Lamont can and should and must direct his commissioner of DEEP. He picked her. He appointed Katie Dykes to be commissioner of DEEP. He must direct her to reject the pipeline permit for the Killingly Energy Center due to threats to water, air, climate, human health, and the listed endangered or threatened species who use the Wyndham Land Trust habitat. The frack gas expansion in Connecticut is destroying our climate, health, and economy, and it's preventing us from cleaning up the grid and creating a future for youth. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. And we're going to keep this fight going until we win.
Thank you, Martha. Powerful words again. And that is absolutely true. Our elected leaders, and I'll put leaders in quotes, the elected representatives of the people need to do what's in the interests of the people, not what is in the interest of big business and profits. And the only way that is going to change is when hundreds of us turn into thousands of us, turns into tens of thousands of us, say no more. Something's got to give. We cannot continue to pollute. We cannot continue to listen to your doublespeak. Actions, not words. You can say you don't want a power plant all you want, but if it's in your power to stop it and you don't, you wanted that power plant. Yep. I don't care what you say. You need to do what's in your power to fix the situation. Yep. And he does have the power to fix the situation. We have to get together. All these groups that are here today, all the people on the call, all the people in the caravan, come together and say, you need to listen to us. Because business as usual is going to kill us. Yep. It's going to destroy the ability for human life on this planet. And we need to fight to survive. And when we fight together, we can win together. Thank you so much, Martha. Up next, we're going to go to Ben Parsons from the New Haven Climate Movement. And Ben, take it away whenever you're ready. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of the wonderful speakers today. My name is Benjamin Parsons, and I have been passionate about climate justice for as long as I can remember. In 2003, the year I was born, the Acadia Center released a roadmap which detailed how to focus on climate policy and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the state of Connecticut. For all of my life, Connecticut has been sitting on detailed reports on how to achieve carbon neutrality and transition to renewable energy, and instead we have been plagued with gross inaction, climate pollution, and now another fossil fuel power plant. In March 2017, ISO New England held its annual auction to ensure that there's enough power generating capacity to meet the region's energy needs, and where power suppliers bid to supply to the energy grid in 2020. The auction's results: no new large power plants are needed to meet our region's projected energy needs in 2020. This proves what we already know. Connecticut does not need more dirty fossil fuel infrastructure. Yet in the midst of a global health emergency, Connecticut DEEP and the legislative authority have approved the construction of more regressive infrastructure that will burden communities with air pollution, water pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and contribute to the negative effects of the climate crisis, which youth will be cleaning up for years to come. By the numbers, the Killingly frack gas plant will release over 2 million tons of carbon dioxide yearly, almost 7% of the carbon dioxide emissions CT produces every year. It will release methane, a gas 84 times as potent as carbon dioxide in its short run and a main contributor to tropospheric ozone. It will waste 18.25 million to 146 million gallons of water per year and potentially pollute the drinking water of many Connecticut residents. It will create a higher risk of shallow surface, potentially high-scale earthquakes in the New England region. It will contribute to methane pipeline leaks. According to Connecticut Sierra, there are 4.3 leaks per mile in Hartford alone. The youth of Connecticut deserve far more than false promises of clean energy. They deserve action. The Killingly frack gas plant is an example of the devastating effects of the climate crisis on youth and setting back the work of achieving social justice. Rather than addressing the climate crisis with available solutions, the state of Connecticut will be leaving our children with more polluting infrastructure, bearing the effects of environmental racism in one of the most segregated states in the country, bearing the effects of climate disasters in a coastal state with 217 miles of Long Island Sound coastline, and leaving us unhealthy and in social unrest. It is time for Connecticut leaders to step up. Connecticut is capable of redirecting the Killingly Energy Center's megawattage capacity to Connecticut Deep's legislature-approved offshore wind farm. Connecticut must pass Senate Bill 718, a moratorium on new fossil fuel power plants. It is time for Connecticut state leaders, Governor Lamont and Commissioner Dykes, to take action. Do what is just for your planet and make a plan, not a plant.
Thank you, Ben. Very powerful words from the youth of Connecticut and very powerful statements about what this plant will really do and what kind of legacy it will leave for the youth of Connecticut. Thank you so much for speaking. It's so great to hear young people. I mean, when I was your age, I couldn't be on a Zoom call speaking to everyone this powerfully. So thank you. And I'm always reminded that the kids are going to be all right. You know what I mean? You're the most progressive generation. You're outspoken. You're fiery and passionate, and we love that. And we need to work more closely with the youth to really get that kind of fire and passion together to really change the system. Okay, so the last speaker today is going to be Ben Martin, who is joining us via a video. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to watch Ben's video here. Just give me 1 second. Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm coming to you from Wednesday. Unfortunately, I can't be there today at the Stop NTE Killingly virtual rally, but I just wanted to give you guys a message from 350 Connecticut that this plant needs to be stopped. It needs to be stopped for many reasons, including that we don't need the electricity from it. We can't afford to put any more emissions into the air if we're going to get to a carbon-free, methane-free energy grid by 2030, which is what the UN tells us we have to do, or else we start to get even worse climate catastrophes than we've seen this week in Texas and in the last few years in Puerto Rico and around the world. So this plant needs to be stopped. Also, it won't help the workers in Killingly. It will hold back renewable projects, as we've seen this week from solar energy companies petitioning Katie Dykes and Deep and Governor Lamont to stop the plant because their businesses will be hurt by building more fossil energy, killing more people, as we saw from the articles saying that 1 in 5 deaths around the world are caused by pollution, which this plant will incur more pollution. So this definitely needs to be stopped, and I'm thankful to everyone who comes out today and pressures Governor Lamont to stop the plant and messages Katie Dykes that she needs to do her job and protect the environment as well as protect the human lives in Connecticut by not building this plant. The Killingly frack gas power, which we don't need. So I want to thank everybody for coming out and say that 350 Connecticut is completely behind you. As I said, unfortunately, I can't be there today, but I'm in full support as well as the whole group is. And there's so much better things we could be spending our time on rather than arguing about this plant, which is not needed. We could be building more solar. We could be doing offshore wind. We could be implementing energy efficiency so that not only do our power bills become less, but the burden on the grid is less. And ISO won't call for us to build fossil energy anymore. Another player in this game that has shirked their duty of protecting us by green lighting this plant. This plant needs to go. The people of Killingly don't want it, and I would assume from the governor's statements of getting to zero carbon energy by 2040, the governor doesn't want it. Katie Dykes said she doesn't want it to run, and yet she hasn't stopped it yet, even though there are permits in her department that could have stopped this plant. It is incongruous that the governor says we need to get by 2040, which is too late. The UN's telling us we need to be off fossil fuels by 2030. That's only 9 years from now. And building a plant now that will somehow be shut down in 8 years is absolute insanity. And it's shows that they're not serious about the things that they're saying. So if they are serious, if they really believe that we need to get off carbon, methane, and all fossil energy, including nuclear, then they would be stopping this plant, but they're not. So keep up the pressure. This is how we stopped the Keystone XL pipeline. This is how we're going to stop Line 3. This is how we're going to stop Dakota Access Pipeline. And I just thank everybody for coming out, and 350 Connecticut's completely behind you, wanting to stop this plant and get into the more important business of transitioning us to green energy, electric grid, green energy jobs, and a society where we value people's lives more than we do fossil fuel profits. Thank you.
Okay, so that was a pre-recorded message from Ben Martin, a climate justice warrior with 350 Connecticut, and he was actually our last speaker. So I'm just going to wrap up here and let everybody get on with their rainy Saturday. So thank you, everyone, for coming out, for being a part of this, for speaking, for lending your voice to this movement. I want to thank especially Juanita, our translator. Makes this so much more possible to get the word out to different groups and things along those lines. And if I had to summarize what we heard from everyone today, I think the most important thing is that all of our fights are really interconnected, right? Whether it's the fight for racial justice or migrant justice or immigrants' rights, or the fight to stop war, or the fight to make sure we have healthy communities, or the fight against economic injustice. These are all one fight. And they're the fight of regular people standing up and saying, we don't want to deal with this anymore. We deserve better. We can have better. A new world is completely possible as long as we can come together and decide that equity, justice, a livable planet are the forefront and not the profits of a tiny minority of people who get rich beyond belief from the exploitation of all of us. So I thank you. I hope you'll join us at our next C3M meeting, which is tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Details can be found on the C3M Facebook page. They can be found at 350ct.org. And as well as I really hope everyone takes a look at our Twitter, which is at CT Climate, which should have some great photos from the car caravan today. I thank you. I hope you have a wonderful day, everyone, and go forward with justice at the forefront of your mind. Thank you so much.